Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first live episode of the year for Visual Studio Toolbox. I'm your host, Leslie Richardson. And if you're coming from Twitch, I know that the .NET Community show is happening right now, so there might be a conflict there. So feel free to hop on over to YouTube if you're not here already. And shout out to John Galloway and whomever else is hosting that show right now. We apologize if we might have stepped over some toes a little bit there. But welcome to our show. We talk about cool Visual Studio tools and tips and tricks here. And today we're going to be talking about a cool design pattern called MVVM. And joining us to talk about that today is Tomasz. I'm going to go in here. Hey, how you doing?
Hi, greetings from Prague, Czech Republic. I'm doing great.
Sweet. Cool. So how was your break? I hope it was relaxing.
It was maybe too much relaxing. I was for 1 week on a vacation. And when I returned to the office, Teams signed me out, the authentication token probably expired. So it was a good vacation. I didn't use Teams for entire week.
Teams is so fickle like that. Because I was in Europe for 2 weeks in October, and I came back and Teams was somehow still treating me like I existed, which I couldn't believe. But yeah, I guess Teams is a fickle creature that way. But yeah, my break was pretty relaxing too. I came back just looking at my calendar like, oh, why? How did I ever do this much? But nice that you had a great break too. So yeah, so before we dive into the nitty gritty, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so my name is Tomasz. I am Microsoft MVP I have to count the rings on that trophy, for 15 years. And I'm doing a lot of things around .NET. And the thing I would be talking about is an open source framework I'm working on for last 9 years. As my job, I'm running a small software company which is building a lot of .NET applications for our clients.
Awesome. Cool. So our topic for today is MVVM, which we're going to be talking all about, and also the .vvm framework. Do you own it, or are you on the team for it? Or
I'm one of the founders. Currently, the team is 3 active contributors and a lot of occasional contributors.
Sweet. Well, cool. I'm excited to learn more about the space and how .vvm can help with our coding productivity needs. So just starting from square one, can you tell us a little bit about what MVVM is and also how it might differ from other design patterns like MVC and things like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so MVVM, people have typically are thinking about MVVM in terms of desktop applications, but also it exists for web applications, and it stands for Model View Model. Basically, the great, huge idea about this design pattern is to be able to write testable pages. Basically, the view model is representing the state of the web page, and if you want to test the web page, you can just test the view model and believe that the framework will do its job. It's quite similar to MVC actually, where there is a controller instead of view model. Both controller and view model, they dispatch commands from the user. So when the user wants to do something to interact with the page, it goes either through a controller in MVC or through view model in MVVM. However, in controller, there is no state. In view model, another component of that is state.
Cool.
But it's quite familiar for people who have been using MVC, or today it's also MVU or other patterns which are quite popular. So it's the MV part is still the same, just the way of handling the user interactions is different between these patterns.
Awesome. So as far as the use cases go for this generally, it would be really great, as you mentioned, for being able to test individual pages that you've got going on in your application.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the MVVM, I have found it very convenient for writing business applications where there is you can find very complicated forms with a lot of state, or big grid views data tables with features like sorting, paging. It's very familiar. It seems very familiar to express these things in terms of view model, because it's more an application than a just simple web page. So the way how MVVM helps you to handle the state of the page is quite convenient for a lot of use cases.
Awesome. Well, so then where does .vvm fit into all of this?
.vvm is an open source framework. It's a member of the .NET Foundation, and basically it's a wrapper over several technologies, which allows you to build web applications using this MVVM approach. And the project started in 2014, before .NET Core, before Blazor. And also similar as in Blazor, in .vvm, you can start with just HTML and C#. You don't need to know JavaScript, the language, the ecosystem around these client-side things. So it's very good for beginners, or for those people who may be experts in .NET world, but it's hard to be expert in both .NET and the JavaScript world. So if you don't want to dive into another world, .vvm is very easy to learn, easy to adopt. Cool. Same as Blazor, basically. The idea is very similar.
Awesome. So I can't wait to see some of this in action. So do you want to move over to demos? Sweet.
Yeah.
And before we do, awesome. And before we do, hi people in chat. If you got any questions as we're going about MVVM or .vvm, don't hesitate to ask. We'll try our best to answer them or help answer them. Cool.
Yeah. So I will have a few demos to show the features of the framework. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer. So basically, .vvm can be used for two main use cases. First is if you want to build a new web application from scratch, and you are familiar with MVVM. If you have been previously developing in WPF or in .NET MAUI, Xamarin, anywhere where MVVM is used, you will be very familiar with this pattern already. So it's a great technology to start the web development. And if you happen to have really old ASP.NET framework applications, then you can use .vvm as a migration path towards the new .NET 8 or to new versions of .NET 8, because .vvm supports both old and new ASP.NET. So you can use the same syntax, same view models, same things in all .NET framework and in the new .NET 8 or any other future versions. So these are two use cases. I will try to show both of them. So as I said, it's a framework which supports ASP.NET Core, the new platform, and the old platform as well. It's using the model view model approach. I will show a demo in a few minutes. And as I said, you don't need to learn JavaScript. You can just use the things you already know, which is C# and HTML. If you can use JavaScript, it's a great advantage because the web is still built on a lot of JavaScript things. So you can extend the framework with the knowledge of JavaScript pretty well, but it's not necessary. It's optional, basically.
Does that also apply to TypeScript at all?
Yeah, of course. It's my favorite one. I never use pure JavaScript. I always use TypeScript. But nice. Anything that compiles or transpiles to JavaScript can be used. And because the framework has its own syntax, you need an extension. For Visual Studio or VS Code, we have extensions on Visual Studio Marketplace. So if you want to start, you can just download these extensions to Visual Studio and then file a new project, and that's how you can start.
Is the extension called .vvm?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'll try to link
so this is how it works. So on the left side, you can see the view, which is just HTML with a special format of data bindings. This is a syntax which is implemented by .vvm. And also there is something like components. Maybe you remember ASP text box from web forms, so it's a bit similar because the framework started at 2014. So like some things are still inspired by the web forms approach, but we don't have view state, don't worry. So here it's how the data binding works, and behind every page there is a view model, which is just a C# class. You can represent state by just declaring properties. In contrast to other MVVM implementations, you don't need to implement iNotify property changed, just plain C# class with these properties and autogetter setters, and it will work. And you can bind this number property to a text box to make a binding, two-way data binding between these two parts. So whenever you set this property from the C# code to some value, it will appear in the text box, and vice versa. If the user changes the text box, it will propagate here. And there is a button which can call any function in the view model. So if it's a public method in the view model, it can be called from a button. So this is how you build this application. And of course, the framework is doing a lot of magic for you. Basically, it somehow figures out a JavaScript version of this view model and make the MVVM binding on the client. So it's not like, for example, Razor Pages, which also have something like MVVM. But in order to perform the binding, you need to do basically post the page on the server. In .vvm, this works on the client. So basically, this is just a template, and the framework will create some JavaScript code for you from this C# declaration.
Cool. And I'm glad you mentioned Razor, by the way, too, because I was going to say it does have a very similar kind of binding mechanic that Razor Pages have.
This is if I return a bit back here, this can be very complex. Like you can use collections, you can use like very complex object structures in this view model, and basically .vvm takes this view model, serializes it in JSON, and sends it to the client, and then does all the things on the client. So in Razor Pages, there was a lot of limitations. If you would want to have collections of objects, that would be quite difficult to map through the HTTP post body. But since .vvm is using JSON, any very complex structure that will be in the view model will be supported.
Cool.
Yeah. So if you want to start, you can just update to latest Visual Studio. We have some compatibility issues with older versions of Visual Studio because the extension extends some DLLs, which changes between Visual Studio updates. So first update to the latest version of Visual Studio, and then you can search for .vvm in Extension Manager, and you will be able to install the extension. And then you can just do File New Project, and you will see .vvm project template. So you can use that. For historical reasons, we have .NET Core in the name, but it will be just normal .NET 8. There is no core anymore. So let's, I have Visual Studio here, and I can show some demos of how .vvm works. So first, if you look at the .vvm application, it's just normal .NET 8 project, and it has the startup file as normally. And here in the services, I'm just configuring services. I don't know why this is underscored, probably some caching issue, but like the application can be compiled, like build succeeded, and it works. So it's maybe I would have to restart Visual Studio. And here in this configured, as normally you will compose your request pipeline. .vvm is basically just a middleware for ASP.NET Core. So you can use it together with SignalR, with ASP.NET Core, MVC, with any other ASP.NET technology. .vvm is just a middleware. And then you have this view models and views folders. And here you can have these markup files which define how the page will look like. And each page has a reference to a view model. So it's a C# class, which is basically backing the page. So I have a simple calculator here. So I have two integer properties, one integer property for result, and a calculate method, which will add these two numbers and assign them to the result. And here in this page, I have two text boxes. Here I'm printing out the value from the view model, and I have this calculate button. The extension for Visual Studio I mentioned, it can do the IntelliSense, so you should get the IntelliSense for these .vvm components. So it should work. And now when I run this application, you can see it's do two text boxes, and here is the calculate button. So if I just enter some numbers here, and I click here, you can see the page was updated. If you look in the DevTools how this works, basically here, when I click on the button, you would just see one HTTP request, which posts some JSON to the server and gets a response also in JSON. Yeah, so .vvm has some JavaScript part, which you don't have to write. It's there out of the box. And basically, it handles the communication between the client and the server. And if you look in the view model on the server, you can see it's a class which has these three properties. And in DevTools, if you write .vvm.state, here is basically a JavaScript representation of this view model. So this is done by .vvm. It basically makes this view model available on the client automatically. Yeah, so you can interact with this also from JavaScript code if you want. .vvm can do a lot of things. You can either, using this command binding, you can just tell .vvm, okay, send this view model as it is now to the server, make the command, and then get the updated view model back. Or you can do something like partial updates. So you can just manipulate with properties of the view model. You can assign things in the properties, or you can call a function on the server and just patch the view model with the result of this call. So for example, this kind of, we call it static command. This basically does the same thing as this, but it doesn't require any communication with the server, because .vvm is able to translate this expression to JavaScript. So basically, when I click on the second button, like I can change some values here, and when I click here, it will also update the result, but it doesn't require any call to the server, because it is basically .vvm generated JavaScript code from this expression. So that's how you can use the MVVM experience. And here you don't need to use this iNotify property change, because when you are changing the values on the server, it's not updating the UI in the browser. But whenever this view model gets serialized and sent to the client, then the values will appear in the text box controls and all other places. And so that's why you don't need iNotify property changed on the server. I have a more complicated sample here, because one of the things that is quite common in business applications is to have a grid view with a list of records from the database. So in .vvm, we have a grid view component, and you can see I'm just assigning data source equals orders. So I need to have some representation of the list of orders in my view model. Then I can declare some columns. So there is an ID column, created date, which is using some kind of formatting of the dates. I can use template columns, so I can provide my own template for the contents of the cell in the table, and some other columns. And here is some kind of edit link. It's basically generating a hyperlink to a route called order detail, and the route has some parameters, so I can specify the parameter like this using this data binding. It will build the URL for me, basically. The routes are defined here in this .vvm startup file. So you can see here is the order detail route with this parameter. Yeah. And if we look in the view model, I have a special property here, special object, and it's some special kind of collection. It's called grid view dataset. And because one of the common scenarios in business applications is that you want sorting and paging, the grid view dataset that can do these two things for you. If you would look inside the grid view dataset, it contains a normal list of these objects, and also it contains this paging options and sorting options, which is basically settings for on which page you are currently standing, how the page is large, and what column you are using for sorting, and the direction of sorting. So it's basically a list plus some metadata for these operations. And if you want to load this this grid view dataset, we have a nice helper method, load from queryable. And if you have iQueryable of these objects, you can just pass it to this method and it will do all the paging and sorting for you. So this get orders query, it just takes all the orders from the database, even if there would be a million orders, never mind, just return iQueryable, and the dataset will do paging and sorting automatically. So when I call this, it will augment this iQueryable, and it will retrieve just the 10 items from the database. So it's quite efficient, and you can load this data on just one line. And it works together with other components. So if grid view specifies here allow sorting, then it automatically can interact with this dataset and tell it, if I click on this column, it will tell dataset, okay, now we are sorting by this property. And also there is a data pager component, which is separate from grid view, but it renders the list of the pages. So if I will run this, I hope the browser will open. Yeah, it should be here. Yeah, so you can see this is the grid view. It has 10 rows, and these column headers are clickable. So if I click on this ID, you can see now I'm sorting by this ID. And here, this is the edit button, as I mentioned, and it just it builds the URL. So here down in the status bar, you can see it's pointing to order/1 because that's the ID of the order. And one of these rows is orange, and that's another feature of grid view. I have this row decorators collection here, and you can basically tell the grid view to decorate rows with CSS classes. So I'm adding a CSS class VIP order if the total price is greater than 500. Yeah. So it will just apply a CSS class on this row, and yeah, you can see here is the class equals VIP order because I have this decorator. Yeah. That's why that's how you can also catch any events on the rows. And if you look here on this page, it's just the order detail, but it's a bit more complicated. I can work here with collections, so I can add multiple rows or I can remove them. When I change anything, it will automatically recalculate the price for me. So like it's quite interactive. And it also supports some kind of validation. If I would try to save it now, you can see there is a validation summary, and this gets read to tell me that something is wrong with this field. So let's see how this is implemented. I have this order detail page, and as you can see, again, it's just HTML with a few components. For example, I can attach this visible equals something to any HTML element, and I will be just showing or hiding it based on some expression I can define here. Here it's normal text box, which is using the data binding. It's fine. we have already seen that. But if you look how the validation is done, here this div defines this validator value, and it's bound to the same property. And basically, I'm saying that if this property would be invalid, something should happen to this element. And here on the top, I have defined that if something is invalid, apply a CSS class has error on it. Yeah, so I can define the behavior of validation globally for the entire form. And then I am just saying where to apply this rule, basically. And this is done by the validation attribute. If you look in this like order detail object, I'm using the standard data annotations attributes on these properties, and .vvm is just taking these attributes and making the validation rules out of that. It also supports this iValidateTable object interface, so I have some other validation like that. At least one order item needs to be present in the collection, otherwise I would get another validation issue. So it kind of tries to integrate with standard .NET ways of how to do validation. So it's
cool.
Very similar. Mm-hmm.
So question about validation and things like that. So is that the only place where you can use those kinds of conditional statements that you were showing earlier, or are there other use cases for being able to, or where .vvm supports that kind of setup?
There are basically three places where you can have this validation. First is the validation attributes and this iValidateTable object. That's great for like formal validation of this object, that the order detail is healthy. Yeah, for example, begin date has to be lower than end date and things like that. Also, if you want to make some kind of business validation, like that the order number must be unique or things like that, probably you would do it normally in the view model, and there is something like context.model_state, and you can add any other errors that you want. So like you can also have very complicated validation rules, and if you bind these errors, you can bind these errors to view model properties. So I can basically make the same text box red marked for some validation error. For example, if the contact email cannot be on some kind of blacklist I would have on the database, then I can indicate and mark the same field, for example. Yeah, so it's quite extensible. So it's you can do a lot of things with that.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I would like to show one more feature of the framework. I said that you don't need to use JavaScript, or you don't need to know JavaScript. However, if you want to extend the framework a bit, then JavaScript knowledge is very useful. And one of the common requests we had as a framework was that we were missing some components. .vvm comes with like 30 components, and because it's an open source project and we need some funding, we are also selling commercial extensions to .vvm. So that helps us, but still there is not enough components, and everybody needs something else. So we added integration with React. So if you are missing any component in .vvm, but you can find a React component that you would want to use, you can do that. And we have implemented a way how to integrate these components with .vvm. So the component can access the view model, and you can respond to what is going on inside the control. So I have another application which is showing the current weather in Prague. It's in Celsius, but like these temperatures below zero are quite cold. So that's and you could see there is some animation when I change the city. You can see the chart is changing, and this chart is a React control. It's from a Recharts package, which is popular charting library for React, and I'm using it naturally, like using this .vvm syntax. So I have this JS bar chart control, and I can just pass data from the view model. So this underscore this, it means like this in C#, because I have set this data context on this element. So it means that it will be this object.
Gotcha.
And also, I'm setting some other parameters, like which properties of these objects should be highlighted in the chart and what colors they should have. And I'm also setting some kind of event handlers. If something happens in the component, I can respond to that. So if somebody clicks on one of the series, I'm passing here a lambda, which will get the name of the series, like this, or this. And it can do something to the view model. So for example, I'm setting selected series equals to the parameter I got here. Yeah. So because React is not using two-way data binding, in React it's always one way. So you have to push data to your control and then listen to events which will tell you that something has changed. So this is a bit a bridge between classic MVVM and the React way, but you have two ways how to interact with the control. And the last step is to tell .vvm how to translate this. And I have registered this JS recharts module here. And this recharts module is written in TypeScript. And basically, it's an object, or like it requires to use export default and export some function, which gets a context and returns an object. And if this object has this controls collection, then each of these elements in this object, basically this bar chart, will be exposed as a component to this JS prefix. Yeah, so I can expose as many components I want, and like it will be possible to use. And when I return here, this bar chart is defined like a register React control, and this bar chart wrapper, I will show it in a minute. And you can specify default values for all the properties of this component, because sometimes you don't want to specify everything in the markup. So you can specify defaults for these properties. And this bar chart wrapper, it's a standard React way how to build components. So basically, it's a function which gets an object with properties of this component, and I'm returning a standard React control from the recharts package. So it's getting this data, which is the list of objects. I'm setting some default parameters, something to use as a label, and some Cartesian grid. And here as a data, I'm taking the series names and processing them and rendering bars for each of the series I want to show in the chart. And here in this onClick, it's basically calling this series click event. So I can wire event handlers on anything in this React area and just call my own event handlers that would be passed to .vvm. So you need to build some kind of wrapper over this React component, but you don't have to expose everything. You can expose just a few features you will really need in .vvm, and then you can easily use this control. And whenever this collection changes, like when I clicked here, it just loaded different data in the collection in the view model, then the component will update automatically, because it will just pass the new data to the React, and the React will do its like diffing of the page, and it will remove elements that should not be present and things like that. So that's how you can integrate any component which would not be available in .vvm. So you can help yourself and do it like this. And there is a lot of powerful React components.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's great that it's compatible with so many other different frameworks and components and all of that too. So it seems like you can mix and match to your heart's content.
Yeah. And this integration bridge, by the way, it's extensible. So if you want to support any other framework, you can just build some other function that will wrap for example, Svelte component for .vvm. We have actually implemented that for Svelte. It's in some experimental mode right now. So if you prefer this framework, you can also use it.
Cool. Yeah, so anything else before we start to wrap up?
I have one more demo. I have mentioned at the beginning that you can use .vvm to modernize old web forms applications. So I have an old web forms project. Like if you would look here, you would see it's using .NET Framework 4.7.2. So it's not that old, but it's still quite dated.
Yeah.
And this on the left side, it's a web forms syntax. So it's a classic run-it server and all these things. And here on the right side, I have rewritten this page in .vvm syntax, and it's not that different. Just there are some changes, like in ASP.NET Web Forms, there is some multi-view component which can show just one or the first or the second view. Here we don't have that, but you have this visible property, so you can just display the first component or the second one and guide it using this Boolean property in the view model. And because .vvm is just a NuGet package that you install in the project, then you can use it even on the old .NET Framework. So if you look in this packages config, you can see I have installed .vvm right here as a NuGet package. And then I can use .vvm with views and view models and web forms in the same project, which is very nice for the migration of web forms applications, because if you would have 1,000 pages here, it's very difficult to rewrite everything in some other technology. But with .vvm, you can install .vvm in this old project and do it incrementally, page by page. And all these pages coexist in the application, so you can have half of the pages in web forms and half of the pages in .vvm, and it will work. You can call the same business logic, you can call the same code from here and from .vvm part. So if you have tried to rewrite web forms projects and you started a new project somewhere else, and then you wanted to get all the old business logic, then you would have to extract all the business logic to some class library, deal with .NET Standard, which doesn't support everything. So it's quite complicated. This you can do in the same project. And after you get rid of all these web forms things, if you replace these web forms pages with .vvm, then you can just change the target framework to .NET 8, and it will work because .vvm is using the same syntax. So it's not like that you would just upgrade the project for a few clicks, but if the application is really large and you need to add new functions in this old area, or it's still changing, and at the same time you want to incrementally modernize this application and eventually get rid of web forms and lift it to .NET 8, this can be one of the ways. Because the syntax of these web forms and .vvm is quite similar, we have created one simple converter that tries to help you with this process. So if you go to .vvm.com/webforms, there is a list of differences between web forms and .vvm syntax. And here is our converter. So if you paste your ASPX markup here and confirm it, it will try to suggest you what you should change in order to have a syntax compatible with .vvm. So for example, this ASP content can be changed to DOT content. We are not using run-it server, so this will remove all run-it servers from here. This will change the text box to DOT text box and create some kind of data binding here. Yeah, and you can continue like this. It's not 100%. Still, you will need to do some changes, but it's better
a good start,
than
yeah.
doing everything from scratch. Now you can just copy the code, and sometimes it infers also some things that you would need to put in the view model. So you can also copy this. So this is a tool which can help you with the migration. We are doing in my company, we are doing quite a lot of migrations of old web forms project using this way, and it's one of the options you can take.
That's awesome. Yeah, even if it doesn't accomplish the entire migration, just having a good place to start is always nice. Having a solid foundation that addresses some of that probably tedious work for you. Yeah. So
yeah, exactly, because there is a lot of projects that are still actively developed, and you cannot afford like to stop bringing new features for like half a year until you rewrite the application. So this allows you to do both things at the same time.
Exactly, because otherwise no one would migrate. That's awesome. So anything else?
I think I have all my demos covered right now. I have just one slide with some links which can be useful. We have more information about the framework on .vvm.com. There is also a link to our GitHub. Of course, we would be happy for any suggestions, ideas, contributions, anything like that. We have a documentation which we try to make complete and upgraded to the latest version. We have also some samples, and one link is missing here, .vvm.com/webforms. It is, if you are interested in migration of the web forms application, that is the good starting point.
Great. And I got to ask, what's next for .vvm? You kind of alluded to a couple things here and there, but want to see if you missed anything else.
Yeah, we are working on more features which we want to add to the framework. Current version is 4.2, and we are already working on version 5. And one of the things I can show here, just to illustrate what we are trying to do, is here I have mentioned this grid view dataset, which you can specify paging and sorting. And we want to make it more extensible, because right now you can sort just based on one column, but not multiple columns. And also for paging, you need to know the page index, zero-based page index. But some APIs are using some kind of continuation tokens or something else. So we want to make this basically as a generic parameter, so you can extend these paging options and supply your own strategy for paging and sorting. And this will also allow us to do magic like infinite scrolling. So when you scroll at the bottom of the grid, it will automatically load the next records and do some kind of virtualization and things like that. So that's what we are trying to extend. And we have been playing also with View Transitions API, which is a very nice way how to make animations when you are going from one page to another. So it's a kind of simple JavaScript API, but it's very nice because you click on this. For example, you would click on that edit link in the table, and it would like slide away, and the form would appear, which makes the user interface much more fluent. So that's also one of the things we are working on. We also have a library called Auto UI, which can auto-generate forms and grids from the C# model classes. So if you supply some attributes to this order list DTO, for example, it would infer the columns in the table automatically. So that's what we already have, and we are also adding more features to this sub-framework.
Awesome. That's exciting stuff. Everyone likes extending upon the stuff that's already good, or expanding on the stuff that's already great. So Tomas, thank you so much for sharing all this. You have a couple fans in the chat. I mean, .vvm rules.
Great.
Someone talking about being a desktop dev, but this would have been awesome without a problem. So a lot of fans. Highly encourage all of y'all to try it out. And also, where's the best place for people to reach you if they have any more questions?
We have a community forum. So if you go to our website and scroll somewhere down to the footer, there will be a link to .vvm forum. It's our community forum, and the entire .vvm team is watching this forum. So if you have any questions, ideas, suggestions, we will be really happy to talk. Please send it here, and we will get back to you as soon as possible.
Great. So that's forum. Cool. I'm going to put it in the chat.
Forum.vvm.com.
Cool. Reach out about .vvm here. Forum.vvm.com. Cool. And other than that, I don't know about you, but feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or whatever if for whatever reason you can't find the forum chat. I can try to help direct you in the right direction. And with that concludes the episode. So Tomas, thank you again for coming on the show. This was awesome. I think that's really cool that there's this really great framework that can help make using that MVVM design pattern that much easier. And it sounds like it's always being expanded upon to be even better than it already is. And yeah, as I mentioned before, you got some fans already. So good stuff.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And thanks to everybody in the chat. Go try out .vvm right now. And also feel free to reach out to either of us if you have any more questions. So until next time, happy coding.
All right.